We are going to start with a quiz, and it's called Name That Movie. I just lift this up?
I think that's how it works, yeah.
All right.
Then put your little hand in mine. There ain't no hill or mountain we can't climb. Babe, I got you, babe. I got you, babe.
Okay, campers, rise and shine, and don't forget your booties, 'cause it's cold out there.
It's cold out there every day. What is this, Miami Beach? I don't
Not
think so.
hardly. And you know, you can expect hazardous travel later today with that, that blizzard.
Oh, that blizzard thing. Oh, well, here's the report. The National Weather Service is calling for a big blizzard thing.
Yes,
Yeah.
they are. But you know, there's another reason why today is especially exciting.
Especially cold.
Especially cold.
Yeah, okay.
But the big question on everybody's lips.
Yeah, they're chapped lips.
They're chapped lips,
Chapped
right. Do you think Bill's gonna come out and see a shadow?
Punxsutawney Phil.
That's right, woodchuck chuckers. It's Groundhog Day! Get up and sit that hog out there. Yes!
Anybody want to take a big chance and name the movie? Anybody know? Groundhog Day. So it was in 1991 when my husband Kent received the call as the pastor to the Punxsutawney Church. And I soon thereafter ended up, I started out, literally my job title was VBS girl. It was back in the day when you had physical Vacation Bible School kits, and it was my job to have a VBS fair in about 15 of our churches to demonstrate VBS kits. And gradually, I progressed up the ladder and ended up as the associate executive there for lots of years. So we were in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania. As someone who grew up in Southern California, it was a revelation. So when we got there, Groundhog Day was a quiet little thing up at Gobbler's Knob. A couple hundred people braved the cold. Phil came out of a box, made his prediction, and then it happened. The movie Groundhog Day came out. Bill Murray actually came to Punxsutawney and stayed in the only little hotel in town. We happened to be at the Panel Hotel for a funeral reception, and there we bumped into Bill Murray in the hallway, there to scope out Groundhog Day. Now, Groundhog Day, the movie, actually was filmed in Woodstock, Illinois. Not one speck of Groundhog Day was actually filmed in Punxsutawney because there was no way for all the movie crew to send the movie rushes every night. They needed to get it to a big city, so Woodstock is right outside Chicago. So in real Punxsutawney, Gobbler's Knob is up on a knob. It's up on a little mountain kind of to the edge of town, and shuttle buses run up and down. And in Punxsutawney, it's not a waltz or a polka. It's a real trek to get up there. Right after the movie came out, the next Groundhog Day was on a weekend. And whereas they had had 337 the week before, they had 35,000 people on the knob the year following the movie. I happened to be up there on the knob, and the master of ceremonies said, okay, they want to know how many people we have on the knob this year. Let's start over there. You, 1, 2. And there were more than 35,000 people up there. So by that time, they had a stump for Phil. I don't know if you caught the footage this morning, but they go and they take the cane, the president of the Groundhog Club, and knock 3 times on the door. And then Phil is brought out. The cane gives the president of the Groundhog Club the power to understand groundhogese. And so they bring out Phil, whose full title is Punxsutawney Phil, seer of seers, prognosticator of prognosticators, king of all groundhogs. And the cane gives the president the power to speak groundhogese. And Phil whispers to the president in groundhogese and tells him which of the two scrolls to choose, one of which will predict 6 more weeks of winter, and the other which will predict an early spring. I, one year, asked the president of the Groundhog Club, who happened to be one of the elders at the Punxsutawney Church, I said to him, Bill, so if Phil sees his shadow, it's 6 more weeks of winter. What happens if he doesn't see a shadow and it's an early spring? How long till spring? And he said, oh, about a month and a half. Do the math. So I was up there on the knob, and there they bring the groundhog up out of the stump, and they elevate him up to the sky. And in the transcendent silence that follows, a hush falls on the crowd, and then the liturgical chant begins. Phil, 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 Phil. And then Phil reveals the prophecy of the future. This year, Phil saw his shadow, as should have been evident by anybody who glanced out their window. The sun was brightly shining, so it will be 6 more weeks of winter. The Weather Channel will tell you that Phil has only been right 37% of the time. But the inner circle, the Groundhog Club, and every resident of Punxsutawney will tell you that in the times where the wrong scroll has been chosen, that is all the fault of Phil's handler, because he didn't listen carefully enough to groundhogese. Phil is never wrong. Phil is the same Phil from, I believe it's now 187 years that Groundhog Day has been celebrated. There's a picnic up on the knob in June, on or as close to the summer solstice as they can get it. And on that day, elixir is poured down Phil's throat, which extends his life for another 7 years. So by this point, with all those 7 years added back to back, Phil will live forever. In the Punxsy Church, whenever Groundhog Day fell on a Sunday, Kent always had a hard time because so many of the inner circle were Presbyterian elders. Phil always came to church on Groundhog Sunday, and being shameless advertisers, they would put in the paper, the Punxsutawney Presbyterian Church, where Phil comes to church. And the children's sermon would involve the kids being able to have a meet and greet with a photographer with Phil, which brought all kinds of people who were visiting the knob, because Phil is notoriously difficult to have a chance to see. The actual members of the church were never there, because every community organization worth their salt did a pancake breakfast where they served bad pancakes and sausage and charged $25 for the privilege to all the tourists coming off the knob wanting breakfast before they left town again. So one Sunday, it was not only February 2nd, Groundhog Day, it was also Transfiguration Sunday, when we celebrate Jesus going up to the Mount of Transfiguration. And he is transfigured, or the eyes of the disciples are transfigured, and he shines in glory. And it was Super Bowl Sunday. And if you live in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania, and you are behind the black and gold curtain, guess what team you root for? Once a Steelers fan, always a Steelers fan, and the Steelers were going to the Super Bowl. So because it was Transfiguration Sunday, the communion table was set, even for all the tourists coming to visit, and the white paraments were out, and Kent came out and discovered that the pulpit paraments, the lectern paraments, the tablecloth on the communion table, and even the little white doilies on top of the trays, all of them had been replaced with terrible towels. It was just that kind of a Sunday in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania. Now, Groundhog Day happens to be the day that was first celebrated by German settlers with hedgehogs back in the old country, and when they came to America, they couldn't find a hedgehog, and that's how we ended up with the groundhog being the prognosticator on Groundhog Day. But layered, if we have Groundhog Day up here, the next layer down is Candlemas Day. Today is Candlemas, and in the old country, the tradition was that at midnight, all of the candles illuminating the house would fly to Rome, magically, there to be blessed by the Pope. And at sunrise, the candles magically would be back in the house so that the light illumining the house would be blessed for the entire year. And the household would be one of blessing. Well, layered even lower beneath Candlemas Day is St. Bridget's Day. Now, it happens that February 2nd is the day that is exactly halfway between the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year, and the spring equinox. So Groundhog Day is right in the middle. And Bridget, who is the first and only female saint of Ireland, it is said that Saint Bridget was born on February 2nd, this day that was halfway between the solstice and the spring equinox. So Bridget was born halfway between winter and spring. And Bridget was born at dawn, halfway between night and day. And she was born on the threshold of the house, halfway between inside and outside. So Bridget is the saint of transitions, even to this day. So Groundhog Day comes with all of these layers going down. Now, when I was up on the Knob, and to be honest, the locals did not go very often to the Knob because they were so busy getting ready with their pancake breakfasts and getting ready to sell the t-shirts, because an organization like the Garden Club could make their entire revenue for the entire year just on a breakfast on Groundhog Day. That's how important Groundhog Day is to the economy of the town of Punxsutawney. So I was up there looking at this massive crowd up on the Knob. Groundhog Day had been the mecca of college students who would come in on buses from all the local colleges, IUP and Slippery Rock. And it was a place where the frats could slip in literally almost half a keg, and it was the biggest party around. Once Groundhog Day exploded, the state police got involved and shut that down, and Groundhog Day is now a dry or mostly dry occasion. And underage drinking will get you a visit to the Punxsutawney jails, so that has happened a few times. So the kids no longer bring their booze to the Knob. But still, the young adults come. It is one of the youngest festivals in the state of Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and one of the top youngest ones anywhere in the country. And I was mesmerized watching all of these mostly young adults there waiting for the transfiguration of the groundhog, seeing this groundhog elevated and waiting for that moment of worship, of prophecy, for a sacred occasion. And it occurred to me, we know demographically that most young adults have never been to church, and many of them are part of families where their parents have never been to a church much. And you would have to go all the way back to their grandparents to be in the time in this country where more people belonged to a church than did not. So when all these young adults are coming off the knob, they certainly are looking for t-shirts, and they are going to meet church people that will sell them pancakes. But it never occurred to them that they might want to come to church on Groundhog Sunday, and there are plenty of churches in Punxsutawney, for a day of worship, it being the Lord's Day and all, before they left town. So their perhaps most profound and sacred moment of worship, maybe in their entire lives, is that hush before the groundhog is elevated. In the movie Groundhog Day, how many of you have seen it? We got to see the premiere, not in Punxsutawney because we didn't have a movie theater, but up in Du Bois, Pennsylvania. We got to see the very first premiere of Groundhog Day. We got the premiere before Hollywood had the premiere, and Bill Murray came to this theater where your feet stick to the floor because they've never mopped it, and the springs are kind of sticking up through the seats. Bill Murray was there. And we were the first ones to see the movie Groundhog Day ever. Groundhog Day is a story of a jerk. Phil Connors is a jerk. And Phil Connors gets stuck in a time loop in which he is living Groundhog Day over and over and over again. He goes through progression after progression. He spends maybe years just being a jerk every single day. And then he wakes up and it's Sonny and Cher singing "I Got You, Babe," and he lives it again. Gradually, after maybe years of it, he starts to better himself. He learns to play piano. And he takes a piano lesson every single day until finally he becomes really good, at least on one number on the piano. And after all those years of bettering himself, he finally starts this whole sequence in which by the end of it, he has a schedule he has to keep. He saves somebody from choking. He grabs a kid that falls out of the tree. He does good. And on a schedule, he perfects the cycle of doing good and saving lives. But through it all, he, first of all, likes, in a kind of a jerk kind of way, Andie MacDowell. I can't remember what her character's name is. It's Andie MacDowell. She's the love interest. And after years, he finally starts to become interested in her and get to know her. But the problem is that at the start of every "I Got You, Babe" dawn, it is back to the beginning. She doesn't know anything at all about him and thinks he's a jerk. And every day he has to go deeper into proving himself and knowing more about her and what it would mean to love her. And he perfects that. Finally, at the very end of the movie, he doesn't know it, but it's going to be his last Groundhog Day. He has perfected it all. And the last thing that he does is he gives himself to the glory of the moment. He quotes a poem by Chekhov, talks about the luminous darkness, and immerses himself in that moment of the elevation of the groundhog, this most ridiculous holiday, the most ridiculous prophecy that you can imagine. He gives himself to the sacredness of the moment and the hush. And in that moment, grace breaks the spell, and Phil is freed to be the transformed self he now is and to go on living. You know, the reason that we gather in church every Sunday, How many of you ever woken up and said, oh, it's Sunday again? And when you're in a household with two preachers, every Sunday is, oh, it's Sunday again. Where do you want to go to lunch after church? You know, it is that kind of moment of going to do your duty. How many of us, we come to church because it's where we go on Sundays? And often there is that sense of duty. You kind of look halfway at your neighbors, the ones who are walking out to get the fresh bagels and read the paper and catch up on the laundry and think, I wonder what it'd be like never to go to church. How many of you ever thought, I wonder what it'd be like never to go to church? And yet, here we are. And this Sunday after Sunday, when we come to this moment, when it's the bread of life, we'll be elevated. And we gather around this table. And when we are at our best, transformed by grace and the ritual of doing this, some of us our whole lives long. I grew up in a family that absolutely opposed to church. They still are. My dad is still alive, the age of 95. No idea how he produced me. Some of us don't have church in our lives, but when we do, we are transformed by the word, by the music, by the kindness, by the bread, by the cup. Eventually, grace transforms us and gives us the eyes to see around us, outside of this place, which is where we find all the young ones that it would never occur to them to wonder what happens in a church. Never, ever, ever. It has never crossed their mind, not even once. They don't know anybody. Most funerals are held other places. Weddings are held other places. Around you is a vast population of people that can tell you the merits of every single brew pub here in Phoenix and have no idea what happens in a church. Zero. They maybe are never, ever going to come here. But you are transformed to know the art of going where they are. I would invite you to pick up your bulletin, and I would invite you to turn to the most interesting part of your bulletin, which is what begins down at the bottom where it says prayer requests. And I want you to count with me the number of ways and opportunities you have to be engaged in the service of others. You have a prayer chain. If you can do nothing else, you can pray for people. You are participating in Presbyterian disaster assistance. You can go play in a pub with people that will go to the foodery, might never come here. You are participating in SCRIP, which gives revenue to give contributions to contribute to God's mission. This is your week for St. Mary's. You are participating in the Super Bowl of Caring. Next Sunday, you have an opportunity to do a little service project while you come here and have some fellowship. You are hiring nursery care, so if young adults do come here with their kids, there's a safe place and you're requiring clearances. You can do cookie decorating and have a fun place with members of Cornerstone Clubhouse. You are doing a coat and clothing giveaway wrap-up and participating as partners with an elementary school. You are looking to try to figure out benefits in order to continue to provide for pastor and family. You are talking about the future of FPC. I get to come be part of that. You are doing not only meals, but also wheels. You are contributing to per capita in order to help the mission and ministry of the Presbytery, the Synod, and the entire denomination in service to the entire world. You're using recycling ink cartridges to free up more money for mission. When you look at all of that, aren't you glad that you have been transformed to be the kind of church that does all of that? So this week, when you go out, it is Groundhog Day again today. And tomorrow it's going to be Groundhog Day, and the next day it's going to be Groundhog Day. And even if you don't start it by listening to Sonny and Cher, I invite you to go out with eyes to look for the people surrounding you everywhere who have never been in a church, whose most sacred moment might be the elevation of a groundhog, or standing in a stadium or in front of their televisions and singing "Fly, Eagles, Fly," and be the presence of Christ for them, because they need Jesus in their lives, and you are the only Jesus they may ever see. Amen. And let's sing.